Hello everyone, welcome to GoWider. In this video, I will explain the chapter Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood, written by Anis Jung. Anis Jung was born in Raurkela and spent her childhood and adolescence in Hyderabad. She received her education in Hyderabad and in the United States of America. Both of her parents were writers. Anis Jung began her career as a writer in India. She has been an editor and columnist for major newspapers in India and abroad and has authored several books. The following chapter is an excerpt from her book titled Lost Spring, Stories of Stolen Childhood. Here she analyzes the grinding poverty and traditions which condemned these children to a life of exploitation. The story is divided into two parts. First part of the story is Sometimes I Find a Rupee in the Garbage. Every morning, the writer sees a young rag picker boy who visits the garbage dump near her house and searches for gold in it. The writer says that he searches for gold ironically because although the garbage dump is full of useless, thrown away things, still he shuffles it so minutely as if he will get something as precious as gold from it. The boy's name is Sahib. His home in Dhaka was in the middle of lush green fields. They had left it many years ago and he does not remember it anymore. His mother had told him that there were many storms that destroyed their homes and fields. So they left home and shifted to the cities in search of gold. The writer again says looking for gold in the big city. Gold here refers to something precious which was not available in their hometown. Things like shoes, money, bags, etc. for the children and food, clothing, shelter as means of survival for their parents. The boy searches for such precious things in the garbage dumps. One day the writer questions Sahib and asks him the reason for shuffling through the garbage. Sahib replies to the writer that he has nothing else to do other than rag picking. The writer suggests that he should go to school. She realizes that her advice is meaningless for the poor boy. He replies that there are no schools in the area where he lives. He also assures her that he will go to school when one is built near his house. The writer asks him jokingly that if she opened a school, would he attend it? Sahib says that he would join the writer's school, and after a few days, he runs up to her to ask whether her school is ready. The writer replied that it takes a lot of time to build a school. She felt ashamed at making a false promise. She had said this as a joke and had never intended to open a school, so she felt ashamed of herself. Sahib was not hurt because he was used to such false promises as they existed in large numbers in his empty world. He was surrounded by such false promises made by everyone around him. His world was empty as no promise made to Sahib was ever fulfilled. The writer had known Sahib for a few months when she asked him his name. He replied as if he was making an announcement that his name was Sahib-e-Alam. The writer thought that the boy did not know the meaning of his name, and if he came to know that his name meant Lord of the Universe, he would not be able to believe it. His name was opposite to his life. He went around the street with a group of friends. It was like an army of boys who did not wear any footwear. They appeared in the morning like the morning birds and disappeared at noon. The writer could recognize all of them as she had been seeing them for the past few months. The writer had known Sahib for a few months when she asked him his name. He replied as if he was making an announcement that his name was Sahib-e-Alam. The writer thought that the boy did not know the meaning of his name, and if he came to know that his name meant Lord of the Universe, he would not be able to believe it. His name was opposite to his life. He went around the street with a group of friends. It was like an army of boys who did not wear any footwear. They appeared in the morning like the morning birds and disappeared at noon. The writer could recognize all of them as she had been seeing them for the past few months. The writer narrates a story told to her by a man from Udupi. When he was a young boy, he would walk to his school. On the way, he would cross a temple where his father worked as a priest. He would stop at the temple and pray to God to bless him with a pair of shoes. After 30 years, the writer visited the town and the temple. Now the place was nearly empty. The new priest lived in the backyard of the temple. Plastic chairs in red and white color were kept there. A young boy came running. He was wearing grey colored school uniform, socks and shoes. He had a school bag hung on his shoulders. He threw it on the bed and ran away. The writer wants to say that the financial position of the priest at the temple had improved over the last 30 years. Now he could afford shoes for his children. She was reminded of another boy who got a pair of shoes. He prayed to the goddess that he may never lose the shoes that he had got. The goddess had granted his prayer as the boy never lost his footwear. This shows us that the underprivileged value anything that they get because they have been longing for it. The writer describes the area where these rag picker boys live. Simapuri, located on the outskirts of Delhi, was very different from the capital of the country. In 1971, when these rag pickers had migrated from Bangladesh, the area had been a wasteland. Simapuri was still a wasteland, but now it was not empty, as almost 10,000 rag pickers lived there in structures made of mud with roofs made of thin sheets of tin or plastic material called tarpaulin. There was no sewage, drainage, or running water facility in Simapuri. They lived in unhygienic conditions. It was a piece of wasteland where the garbage of the city was collected. These people had started living there illegally. The rag pickers had been living illegally in Simapuri for the last 30 years. They have occupied the area without government permission or ownership. The politicians of the area have provided them ration cards and voter identity cards. They got grocery for their family through these ration cards, and in return they cast their votes in favor of the politician who had helped them. The writer asked a group of women who were wearing torn saris that why did they leave their homes in Dhaka. They replied that if they were able to satisfy the hunger of their families and sleep well at night, they were happier to live in Simapuri than their fields in Dhaka, which were ruined and gave them no food. Wherever they find food, they pitch their tents that become transit homes. Children grow up in them, becoming partners in survival. And survival in Simapuri means rag picking. As they had been doing it for many years, they became trained at rag picking and did it well. For the rag pickers, the garbage was as precious as gold. These families searched the garbage dumps and got things which they sold to fund their food. They gathered torn or damaged sheets which were used to cover the roof of their homes. These did not cover them well, but still provided them with some protection. For the children, the garbage dumps were more than a means of survival. Sahib was happy to say that sometimes he found a rupee and even a 10 rupee note in the dump. As one often finds even a silver coin in the garbage dump, he kept on searching, hoping to find more. For the children, the garbage dumps was a means of fulfilling their dreams, although partially, while for their parents it was a means of aiding survival by providing the basics, food, clothing and shelter. One winter morning, the writer saw Sahib standing by the fence of a club. He was watching a tennis game being played by two young men. Sahib liked the game but could not play it. He told the writer that he went inside the club when it would be closed. He was allowed to take swings by the writer saw that Sahib was also wearing tennis shoes. They did not look appropriate with his dress, which was worn out and had faded. He told the writer, in an attempt to justify himself, that someone gave him the shoes. She, however, figured out that he had got them from a garbage dump. They must have been thrown away by a boy from a rich family, as he did not want to wear them anymore. Probably they had a hole or two in them, due to which he did not want to wear them. On the contrary, Saheb was not bothered by this and had no problem wearing them as he could not afford anything better than that. He walked barefoot and to wear a shoe even with a hole was like a dream for him. Although due to the garbage dump, Saheb's dream of wearing shoes had been partially fulfilled. But his desire to play tennis would not. One morning, the writer met Saheb, who was on his way to the milk booth. He was holding a steel container. He told her that he had got a job at the nearby tea stall. He would earn 800 rupees a month and get meals too. The writer asked him if he liked the job, as she could see that he had lost the carefree look. As now, Saheb was working for someone else and was carrying his master's container. He was burdened with responsibility. Earlier, as a rag picker, Saheb would carry his own bag and was his own master. Now, the second part of the story, Lost Springs. The story is titled, I Want to Drive a Car. The writer meets a boy named Mukesh who aspires to become a motor mechanic. The boy was confident and replied that he would learn to drive a car. His dream was far away from reality, and although the boy was confident, he would succumb to the societal pressures. He lived in Firozabad, which was famous for glass bangles. The writer felt that the boy's dream would not materialize and gradually get influenced by the dusty streets of Firozabad. She wanted to say that as every family in the town of Firozabad was involved in the glass bangle industry, so would Mukesh do with the passage of time. She tells us that Firozabad was the main town of India for the glass blowing industry. The families had been involved in working at furnaces, welding glass, and making bangles for generations. They made so many bangles that it seemed that they made bangles for all the women of the world. Mukesh's family was also involved in the profession of glass bangle making. They were not aware of the law. They did not know that it was unlawful to force children to work in such glass furnaces. The workplaces were hot, dark, closed rooms without ventilation. The writer felt that if the law would come into a force, it would rescue almost 20,000 children from these inhuman places where they were forced to work hard during the daytime. They often ended up losing their eyesight also. Mukesh was happy as he took the writer to his home. He felt proud as he informed her that it was being renovated. They walked down streets which were full of garbage and gave foul smell. The streets were lined with slums which were unsteady. The walls were falling apart. The doors were unsteady. There were no windows and were full of families where people lived along with animals. They reminded the writer of the prehistoric man who lived just like animals. Mukesh stopped in. The house where Mukesh lived was partially constructed hut. In one corner was a firewood stove made with dead grass. There were plates with chopped vegetables in them. There was a thin young woman cooking the evening meal for the family. Her eyes were full of the smoke emanating from the stove, but she was still cheerful and smiled to see the writer. She was the wife of Mukesh's elder brother. Although she was not much older than Mukesh, she was a responsible person and was worthy to get respect from the family as the daughter-in-law of the family. She took care of 3 men, her husband, Mukesh, and their father. As Mukesh's father entered the house, the daughter-in-law hid behind the wall and covered her face behind her veil. It was a tradition for the daughter-in-laws to hide their face in the presence of the older male members of the family. The elder here was a poor bangle maker. He had worked hard all his life, first as a tailor, then as a bangle maker. He was still not able to either renovate the house or send his sons to school. He had just managed to teach him the skill of making bangles. Mukesh's grandmother justified her son by saying that he was destined to make bangles as it had been their family profession. She had seen her husband become blind due to the dust from polishing the glass bangles. She said that their family had got this art of bangle making from God, and so they had to carry on the tradition. They were born in a particular caste which had to follow the profession of bangle making. All their life they had just seen these glass bangles. They were everywhere, in the backyard, in the next house, in the yard, and even in the streets of the town. There were huge spiral bunches of bangles in different colors like gold, green, blue, pink, purple. There were bangles of all the colors of the rainbow. Further, the writer says that there were bangles in the neglected yards also. They were dumped on handcarts for sale. They were pushed by men along the streets of Firozabad. The elderly women complained that she had not eaten even a seer of food. Seer is a unit of measuring quantity. The women wants to say that they are so poor that they cannot eat enough food. That is the benefit that she has received by adopting the profession of bangle making. The woman's husband has a flowing bird. He says that he does not know anything other than bangle making. All that he has been able to accomplish is to make a house for his family to live in. Hearing him, one wonders if he has achieved what many have failed in their lifetime. He has a roof over his head. The writer wonders that probably the old man has achieved something which many other people have not been able to achieve. The cry of not having money to do anything except carry on the business of making bangles, not even enough to eat, rings in every home. The young men echo the lament. The elderly women complained that she had not eaten even a seer of food. Seer is a unit of measuring quantity. The women wants to say that they are so poor that they cannot eat enough food. That is the benefit that she has received by adopting the profession of bangle making. The woman's husband has a flowing bird. He says that he does not know anything other than bangle making. All that he has been able to accomplish is to make a house for his family to live in. Hearing him, one wonders if he has achieved what many have failed in their lifetime. He has a roof over his head. The writer wonders that probably the old man has achieved something which many other people have not been able to achieve. The cry of not having money to do anything except carry on the business of making bangles, not even enough to eat, rings in every home. The young men echo the lament. The writer suggests them to form a cooperative. She talked to a group of young men to get out of the clutches of the cruel middlemen who had trapped their elders. The men said that if they dared to do something like that, they would be dragged and beaten up by the police and sent to jail. Their acts would be termed to be unlawful. The writer felt that as they had no leader, they could not think of doing things differently. They all were so tired, the men and their fathers. The men complained that it was a continuous process. Their poor condition led to lack of concern for their problems. This made them greedy and led to injustice. The writer envisioned that there were two separate worlds. One was of such families who were stuck in poverty and the pressure of doing the traditional profession according to the caste in which they were born. The other world is a never-ending cycle of moneylenders, middlemen, policemen, law-keepers, government officials and politicians. Both of these worlds had forced the young boys to follow the family traditions. The young boys get into the profession and become a part of the vicious cycle even before they realize it. If they did anything else, it meant that they were challenging these two worlds. The boys had not been reared up to be bold so that they could dare to go against the system. The writer was happy to sense that Mukesh had the spark in him. He repeated that he would be a motor mechanic. He wanted to go to a garage and learn the job. The writer asked that as the garage was at a distance from his home, Mukesh insisted that he would walk up to it. She asked him if he dreamt of flying planes. The boy became silent and refused. He did not know about them as he did not know about planes. Not many planes flew over Firozabad. As he had only seen cars moving around in Firozabad, his dreams were restricted up to them.